Hey guys, this is Dan with Gears and Gadgets. Thanks for tuning in. So I'm down here right now, Saturday night, cruising around Scottsdale, and I just decided to come out here and put a video together and kind of talk about this channel, who I am, and really why this even exists, I guess you'd say, for me. The reason why I want to do this is because I just got back from the Get On Moto Fest, which was last weekend, and it's getting to the point now where people come up to me and they watch my channel and they want to meet me, and I started kind of thinking about it. I'm like, you know, what's crazy is that it's like there's that relationship that's there, and I love every second of it. I think it's awesome, but I feel like I kind of need to share a little bit more about who I am, where I come from, and why this channel is what it is for me with the motorcycles and the trucks and the gadgets and the things that I do, which is a really interesting story of how I got here. And I just kind of even thought about this after having a conversation with a coworker the other day about this kind of like playground that I've created for myself that has kind of been missing my entire life. I come from a family of, there's 5 kids, 3 different fathers, and then there's also ex-step siblings that a handful of them I still consider brothers and sisters, but for the sake of this video, otherwise it'll be 4 hours long, we'll just talk about the siblings that I have, you know, the 5 of us, I guess you'd say, that really grew up, lived in the same household, got on the same school buses for our whole childhood. So you have my older brother and older sister who come from a father that actually passed away prior to me being born. And then you had my father who married my mother and had me and my sister. And then they ended up being divorced by the time I was, I want to say 3, very young. And then my mother remarried to my ex-stepfather, now you would say. But I consider him a father still to this day. Ron is an awesome influence in my life, and they had my younger brother. So they were together until I was maybe somewhere 10, somewhere in that range. And after that, you know, for that time, we actually lived in a mobile home. It was out kind of in the, I guess you'd say, suburbs of Buffalo, but significantly north of Buffalo. For our upbringing, that was who we were. It was fine. Honestly, it was a great time. Once they ended up getting divorced, we ended up moving. My mother moved us into subsidized housing. Now, we were in that subsidized housing for the significant portion of what I would call my formative years in my childhood. So from, I don't know, call it, 8 to 10 maybe, somewhere in that range. I could be off by a couple of years, to about 15. What I will say for me, which is interesting, at least my personal take on the whole situation, is that we grew up in this subsidized housing in a rather affluent neighborhood, which was bizarre. But it's interesting because every time I hear somebody talk about privilege, I think back to those years and I'm like, man, it did not feel like privilege. When you are the poor kid in an affluent neighborhood and you live in basically the projects, it looks super fun. When you live in the subsidized housing community, the other families in the neighborhoods and things like that, for the most part, you kind of find like they don't let their kids go hang out over with less fortunate kids, and it's pretty glaringly obvious when you're young that that's kind of going on. But it's just what it is. So, you know, we, for the most part, like my brothers, we shared a bedroom, and Nintendo, that was our jam. When I would go to my father's on the weekends, well, I was in the driveway with him helping fix cars, grabbing tools, probably grabbing the wrong tools. It was just part of what my weekends were. And it was not because my father was wrenching on some sort of project car in the driveway. He was wrenching on some POS that he just needed to get running again for Monday morning so he could get to work. it was not wrenching out of hobby, it was wrenching out of necessity. And then I also would go to, we'd go to the races. There was a speedway nearby, which is also part of why I love the Cletus McFarland content. Brings me back to when I was a kid on the weekends going to the racetrack and things with my father. That's where I got a lot of this ability and willingness and desire to fix things myself and kind of figure it out. But what I will say is that growing up with my brothers, and not to say that the sisters weren't a part of that, but obviously when you have brothers, there's that brotherly kind of thing there. We had each other. We also were ruthless with each other. It was an interesting bond for sure. But because we were very different and had basically different blood for, as far as fathers went, we also were just very different in interests. I would go to my father's on the weekends and, he was listening to Van Halen, Metallica, and, stuff like that. And then my other brothers were more like, I guess you'd want to call it like, when we were younger, pop mainstream kind of thing like that. But I was very interested in motor stuff, motor sports. It was a part, I had dirt bikes and, things like that I would, ride on the weekends at my father's, and that my brothers would make fun of me for because it wasn't anything they were remotely interested in. So my mother ended up remarrying again. When I was 15, we moved from this affluent neighborhood. So we had gone from the projects, ended up moving out to the country. We went from a school, basically dropped half the size of graduating class into a very small, what I would call like farm town. It was weird because now here I am, this kid who moved from this affluent neighborhood and had all of the baggage from living in subsidized housing in my head. That was my identity at that point in time. But then when I got to that school, I was like immediately like a cool kid because I had come from this place that other people probably were like aspiring to go to. So they didn't know that I didn't belong there, or those weren't my people, or whatever you want to call it. It was very interesting to me to have that kind of trajectory, because here I am at like 15 years old, and had I have known that was kind of what was happening at the time, I probably would have been better equipped to handle it. But when you're living in that moment, you're not really capable of really figuring out what's going on. It was just very weird to me because like all of a sudden, like a lot of people kind of wanted to be my friend, and it just felt very weird. So I ended up actually pulling out of school even more at that point in my life. And I just kind of, I don't know, man, the whole social thing in like high school at that point, I just kind of had to get out of it. And that's what I did. So, by the time I was 16, I got a job, 16, 17, I got a job at Blockbuster Video. Looking back on it, it was an absolute blast. And from that point, I was making real money. And I was lost. I was way lost. And, I did my fair share of drinking, not to the point where I would say it became problematic. It didn't help anything, but I like to kind of party at a pretty young age. I try to live life where I say, like, I don't regret a whole lot, not necessarily proud of things, but I don't like to live with regrets, because even the bad stuff, you learn from it and you should grow from it, and I feel like I have. So I'm grateful for everything, even the bad stuff that's happened in my life, because it's made me who I am today. Also lets me be able to handle comments from trolls on YouTube. Like when I get stuff from people who think that they're really cutting deep, it's like, man, you have no idea where I come from. So it doesn't bother me. And if you want to get in the gutter, I can get right in the gutter with you. It doesn't bother me. But I ended up going to college, and it didn't feel like it was for me. I felt like I was living somebody else's life, probably because of what I had come from, to be totally honest with you. And so I left school, and at that point, that's when my father was like, dude, just go to work. Like, it's not that hard. Just go get a job. You'll make good money in construction, and go and do that. So I did. And now here we are. I'm 38 years old, and I've had a pretty successful career. Now, to get into this channel, which is very interesting to look at is that when I went to work in the construction industry and I started doing that as a job, I took it seriously and I just put my head down and went to work. And I'm going to tell you that 10 years just went by. Ultimately life was good, but I was not living any sort of life, doing anything that I wanted to do. And that's why I talk about this channel now. What's really interesting is that I was probably 32 when I found drones were coming out, and I saw at that time I think Google Street View had the ability for anybody who had the equipment to go out and actually do like the indoor 360 tours and things like that. So I bought all the gear and I thought I was going to become rich, because I'm like, everybody's going to want the interior of their businesses to be on Google Maps. And I decided to go whole hog into that, totally premature. And it turned out that everybody, as soon as you tell them that you're doing something for Google, they want it for free. And turning that into an actual monetizable thing was impossible. So ended up right back into construction again. And it was one of those things where it's like that little experience, though, buying a camera and a trip that I took to China for my brother's wedding, where I had bought a handheld camcorder and recorded all of that, and then got home and edited that footage into something. That's when the bug kind of caught me, and I decided, like, hey, I don't come from a whole lot, and I see these other YouTube channels doing reviews and they're getting free stuff, and I kind of want to play around with that, and that's what got me into this channel. It wasn't until a couple years ago that I realized that I can kind of turn this channel into something that scratches the itch of what I never really had that I always really wanted, which was to tinker with things. And the fact that I even own a 2018 Harley-Davidson today, if you told me that 10 years ago, I would have laughed at you. I just never would have thought it was ever in my life that something like that would be possible. I've been driving like newer cars and stuff since I was in my young 20s, and I always really wanted a vehicle that was good, and I paid for that. But aside from that, like, man, I've lived paycheck to paycheck, and I have not had a whole lot. Since I got out of my teen years, I've never really had nothing. I've actually had a very good life, I would say. In context to what I'm doing now with this YouTube channel, the bike, I've got a freaking 2021 F-150 on order. All of this grind that I do on this YouTube channel comes from my upbringing. So when I tell people I'm doing 3 videos a week, I work a full-time job, it's a lot. It is a lot of work. But I am not afraid of hard work, never have been, and it's just time. And the time that I put into this today is what it is tomorrow, and it's showing signs of growth. So I'm going to keep putting into it. I just really realized for the first time this has become a part, a significant part of my life, of something that I had always been missing, which is awesome. The fact that YouTube, and combined with my hard work and efforts and the support of you guys, has given me the ability to have this. It's crazy. Now, going forward, I'll probably get into maybe a little bit more if you guys are interested into, more of the story of, where I come from. But I just wanted to get out here tonight, share with you guys a bit of a reflecting back on who I am, again, out of respect to the fact that people are willing and wanting to approach me to say hello. And because of that, it's like, I feel like I need to share more about me, who I am, what I'm about. I don't know, to me it just seems like something, as a YouTuber, as somebody who consumes a lot of content, I appreciate knowing and seeing that kind of opening up on YouTube, and I want to make sure that I am contributing to what I think is the ultimate success of being a YouTuber, and that is kind of opening up a little bit. Back here at a Harley-Davidson in Scottsdale, where I actually bought this bike. They are obviously closed. But, so guys, that is kind of my story of where I come from, who I am, kind of on surface. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. If this is your first time tuning in, please hit that subscribe button down below. Remember, likes go a long way to help support the channel. See you guys next time.